안녕하세요. 파크준 SDC의 파크입니다. 저희가 매주 새로운 인터뷰로 우리 저번에 봤던 우리 이스라엘에 있는 리엄 그리고 한국에 계시는 좋은 스피커 분들과도 여러 가지 매일 인터뷰를 진행하고 있으니까 매주 관심 가져주시고 국제 정서 그리고 general 정치에 관한 것들 그리고 여러 가지를 저희가 영안으로 제작하여 재미있는 콘텐츠를 배움이 있을 수 있도록 제공하고 있으니 많은 관심 가져주시면 감사하겠습니다. 그리고 좋아요, 구독 부탁드립니다. Hello, Liam. Welcome. How's it going, buddy? How's it going, my friend?
Thanks again. Things are going pretty fine. The tension is a bit low, and we're doing good.
Yeah, so many things you're, putting in consideration, a relationship with Europe. We don't know the whole story behind it. So I had many questions to ask you today because you're the one who lives in, Israel at Tel Aviv, and you're the citizen there, so you know all about it. So yeah, with so many fake news going around, it's best for me to ask you all the history behind it. So let me ask you, okay? So question I wanted to ask you, Liam, is, and thank you for coming back again, discussing all this Middle Eastern stuff that no one knows about. And everybody, that's what we talk about every week. So please subscribe and please press like, and thank you so much. So Liam, so I have a question. And I've been kind of looking and how do current tensions reflect the need for a more reactive approach in the region?
Well, I would say that I heard once in a lecture that I listened to on the radio
Mm,
that there is a saying in the Middle East
mm,
that politics always shift with the wind, like shifting dunes. Whoever was or have seen videos of the Middle East have
mm,
seen the massive mountains of sand who move according to the wind. There is always a constant change, and states often find themselves in positions
mm,
in a re-evolving region because the region of the Middle East always finds itself in repositioning. One of the best examples is the relations between Saudi Arabia
mm,
and the United Arab Emirates. For decades, the relationship between them was very good. They were like closest brothers. Both the monarchies. But recently, I think it is in Yemen. They reveal a lot of differences in their approaches in the civil war in Yemen. Saudi Arabia supports the president of Yemen. I think he said his name is Rashid El Alimi, while the UAE is engaged with various tribes that oppose Rashid's leadership, and they have their own coalition, which I don't remember the exact name of it. But today, in the Arab social media, especially in the channels that are loyal to the Saudi monarchy, the Emirates are called the dogs of the Jews because they made peace with us and they so-called abandoned the Arab cause. So in such environments, you obviously need to be more adaptable and be ready not just to shake hands, but also keep your head high and keep your finger in the trigger.
mm. Thank you, Liam. Anything else?
I don't think so.
So Liam, so that was just but getting back to the main point here, I was gonna ask you. So you were saying Europe won't confront Iran to protect its interests. So Europe will not help just for their own benefit. So in the relationship in the Middle East, I wanted to ask you about how do current tensions reflect the need for a more reactive approach in the region? I was curious about that. So can you elaborate on that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. But first, we have to understand the European mindset about not just in the Middle East, but also in international affairs. Let's call it that way.
Mm,
Since the end of the 1940s, and the end of the European colonial rule in the Middle East,
Mm.
Europe always tried to stay involved in here, but it was mostly a secondary player compared to, let's say, the Americans and the Russians. They always played the role,
Mm.
and Europe was a minor character. Let's call it that way. And also, we need to understand something important. After two world wars that devastated the continent, estimates are around 100 million dead in less than 30 in 30 years. Europe of today developed a strong belief in diplomacy, stability, and solving conflicts through negotiations. But the problem is that it doesn't always work in countries that face immediate threats, like that face immediate threats, like countries like Israel, Taiwan, South Korea, or even India won't accept such an approach. But where's the problem? In order to keep the peace, Europe many times find itself aligned with politicians who offer a better economic opportunities and stability, even though it creates a massive, let's say, moral gap
Mm.
with Israel.
Okay.
So it leads to the reason why the younger generation in Israel is attracted more to the USA, to East Asia, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, and such, and India than the generations of our fathers and our grandfathers. Because from our point of view, and I'm sure we will get to that, I'm sure we will get to that.
Okay, so go ahead.
Europe will advance its own interests, even if it means to put Israel on the side, and in radical cases, even betray it.
Mm.
I mean, it already happened in the past, but we, the younger ones, are much more aware of it.
Mm. I think it's you guys have much more input with everything you guys see on the media. You guys are much more aware of the situation. That's probably why too, right? You guys have much more quicker at picking up information than your fathers and mothers and grandpas and grandmas. That too.
It's our entire generation like this.
Yeah, yeah. So we pick up very quickly. Same as here. People, the young generation picks up very quickly, so we don't get confused or we don't get taken in by the propaganda the media throws. Yeah. I see. So thank you, Liam. Anything else to share with that?
I don't think so. I'm sure we'll get to the rest of the points much later.
Okay, thank you. I always appreciate the comments you make and all the things you always contribute to let us know. Many
Appreciate it.
Koreans got to know thanks to you because no one talks about this in the news at all. Like even my family always asks me all about Europe and Iran and the Middle East, but no one talks about it. So I have to tell her. But hopefully, but they all get it eventually. But they're still listening and getting it. So I think it's good that we're giving more information because all this information you're telling me, it can't be just done in one video. You have to go through many videos to explain because the Middle Eastern history is so long, right? And the conflict between. So it'll take us a while, but we'll get to one by one. Mm. So my question is, I had in my mind was, I had many things to consider and think, but I was thinking there was a Europe's involvement in the Middle East. I hear there are many cases, so I was curious. Why does Europe continue to favor diplomacy? And where is that approach falling short? Can you tell me in detail, please?
I think that now we're getting to the main issue that Israelis and even Americans are criticizing Europe for. I mean, of course, they have their own interests, and we have seen it in the recent war, not to attack Iran, but when we talk about it, many countries didn't attack Iran, but let's put it in proportion.
Mm.
First, we need to understand why the countries of the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and I think also Kuwait, but don't get me wrong here, got hit far worse than Israel by the Iranians. It reached our news, but I doubt, but it also reached the news of the Americans. But they didn't get involved for one reason. As long as the Iranian regime is intact, they have a good reason to be afraid.
Mm,
Because if the negotiations, let's say, fail or something,
mhm,
those countries, the countries of the Gulf,
mhm.
will be in the first line of fire. And if the
That's the problem.
Iranian regime, if the Iranian regime stays in power,
Mhm,
it will be wounded, dangerous, and angry. And if the Gulf countries didn't stand publicly with Iran,
mhm.
it will lead to a disaster after Trump leaves the office. But also, I know this also from my followers. It's no longer a regional issue,
Mm,
and
that's
countries from East Asia are getting involved too.
mhm.
Japan has shown support for the American efforts, and
Yes, heard about it. Yeah.
South Korea did exactly the same. I heard that they even pressured the Iranian diplomats to open the
Ah,
Hormuz Strait.
really? Because they don't really talk about it at all. The Korean, they
I
just
read I
free.
I read about it, but because I also think it's partly
Yeah.
of the same reason.
I
Look,
thought that yeah, I thought they're
because
pro China, so I thought they're not gonna say anything. The current Korean government.
no, but they did. But they know that if the government of Japan and South Korea
Mm,
would, let's say, too much involved in what's happening in Iran,
mm,
then North Korea and China would measure a counter move and would move closely to the Iranian regime. So
mm.
that's something also we need to consider.
Okay.
Why Europe is still hesitant? I think there are two. I think there are two reasons.
Mhm,
The first reason is money. Europe invested around 30 to 50 billion euros in Iran, not dollars, euros,
mm,
especially in the oil industry. And they are afraid that if they will lose it, that they will lose it after the regime will fall. From their perspective,
mm,
they already went through the same scenario in 2003 in Iraq.
mm,
When the US invaded,
mm,
Saddam Hussein fled Baghdad and was later found in hiding not far from his birthplace. After Saddam was hanged,
mm,
a new anti-Saddam government was established with the help of the governor Bremer. I think that was his name. The Europeans approached the new government and asked to if they can take their investments. The response they received was told directly in their faces. We don't know. Let me search it. We don't know what you did with your money. You gave it to Saddam. Ask the money from him.
mm,
We don't recognize your investments. There will be no new dealings, and we don't want to do any business with you. You supported Saddam Hussein. Ask the money from him. Go ask the money from him. You can go to hell.
mm,
This experience also shaped how Europe looks at Iran today. There's also a real concern that if the Islamist regime in Tehran falls, a new government, and even especially the separatists, will say to the Europeans, go to Khamenei, go to the Revolutionary Guard. Your money is with them in the suitcases they took to Russia and China. Go ask the money from the Revolutionary Guards. I think that the second reason is NATO itself. Since the fall of the Soviet Union and the disappearance of the communism, Western Europe became more, I would say, apathetic about its own security. The general attitude is that there is no need for mass recruitment or large standing armies because, in their mindset, the United States will eventually take the lead if something serious happens.
mm,
During the Cold War, I would say until the end of the 1980s, countries like West Germany maintained forces capable of responding to any major Soviet threat. They had the capability. Today, many estimate that Germany couldn't last a week if it is truly challenged by the Russian army. So if your people are willing to serve, and the limited and the military readiness is very limited, how do you expect those countries to send forces beyond their own borders? Like, how can I say? I think that is also one of the reasons why Trump and his officials have been so critical of NATO, arguing that many countries that arguing that many of the membering countries don't contribute their fair share to the alliance.
Yeah, yeah, it happened a lot. Same with Korea. They didn't help, and I was kind of really disappointed with that because if we were under President Yoon's power, we would have helped USA just like they do the Zaitun did in the back in the day. But just because this time we're in a different government, I don't even want to admit it.
No,
Then
I don't think the government is the issue because South Korea there is mandatory service, same as in Taiwan, and
yeah,
and I think that the president, in case of war, you can obviously mobilize against North Korea
yeah.
and win. So so I do understand where it comes from, but like let's say there in Europe there is no mobilization
Mm,
except for Eastern Europe. We'll get to that in a second.
mm.
But in Korea, yeah, the concern is much less because there's mandatory service and all.
Yeah, but I'm saying Korea should help them too over there in Iran because Korea gets 90% of its oil from that area, which we're suffering from since that part of the sea is closed right now. So Korea
As I
should.
said, as I said,
Mm,
as I said earlier, I can understand why it
mm,
doesn't matter if it's a leftist government or a right wing government.
mm.
I can understand why Europe and Japan won't help the USA and Israel because China and North Korea would counter move. I already
That's what I
said that.
mean. Yeah, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, because it's a global fight. It's like World War III, kind of in a way. Yes, for sure. So, okay, thank you, Liam. I really appreciated that. Thanks for elaborating all on that. Do Europeans have different perspective on Israel? I wanted to ask.
It really depends on who you ask.
Mm,
Like some countries are more supportive of Israel and the USA.
mm,
Let's say the best example is Germany, because even though I don't know how to call it prime minister, but the title is basically chancellor. His name is Chancellor Merz, I think. He comes from a more, let's say, liberal background. But though he is more liberal, he understands the severity of the situation and what could happen if Iran is not contained, and it is shown, let's say, willingness to stand with Israel and and the United States against Iran. And he did say that, but indeed he did say, like, but on the other hand, countries like Spain, France, and the United Kingdom took a totally different route.
mm,
They oppose. They said it many times throughout the war. They oppose any sort of military action against Iran, especially against its leadership, and they rely heavily on negotiations. They said it in speeches. I would say I wasn't shocked, but it surprises me every time. But we also have to consider that they're heavily influenced by internal political pressures within their own parties, especially the left, because most of their, let's say, more radical left pushes them harder against Israel, against America, and also the more, let's say, liberal parties rely on um, the Muslim voters.
mm.
But let's say Italy, but Italy, despite it being a right wing government, it is still very hesitant to condemn Iran openly.
Yeah, because Europe has been now almost you can say, kind of taken over by the entire Muslim population, as we discussed before. They have the voters right? So they can really decide on the government policies, as we discussed before. Yeah, I remember.
especially in the cities.
Yeah, especially I've seen it a lot in France and everywhere to France, England. It's a problem, but I guess it's a very hard measure to say how they're going to deal with it, but it'll take some time. Huh. Well, everything internationally is not just not never an easy deal. So many things you have to consider. So thank you, Liam. And how about that part?
Okay, I know what you're getting at.
Mm,
Eastern Europe, as far as I see it,
mm,
is not focused on Iran and the Middle Eastern problems
mm,
because their main concern is the Russians.
mm,
For them, this priority is much closer to their home. Putin, the Russian army, and even the presence of North Korean troops in Ukraine, in Ukraine, because it's right on their doorstep. It's right next to them. Like for Israel, for Koreans, it seems like very far away. For them, it's nearby. But back when I was in Seoul last year, a Korean activist told me something that stuck with me in a good way. When you have troubles when you're within your own neighborhood, you don't look for troubles elsewhere, and that's one of the that heavily resonates within politics of Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and also in the Far East. I noticed, like Korea, Japan, Vietnam, or any other country.
mm. Okay, I see. I see. Thank you, Liam. Thank you for sharing your experience. And it was interesting to hear what you experienced in Seoul, with the activists. So, going with that, so what about the future? What's going to happen in the future? What are your predictions? The outcomes will be soon. Just curious to ask. Can you please,
Look,
yes, tell me?
uh, uh,
Yes.
no, n- nobody can expect the future, but from what I see,
Mm,
and what I read in the news, we are seeing growing investments, not just from the United States, but from other countries, South
mm,
Korea, Azerbaijan, India, the United Arab Emirates, and Japan are becoming more involved in the Israeli stock market. They invest in the AI that comes out of here, the high tech, and the medicine, which means that Israel is not just a security partner, but it is also a partner for innovation and economic cooperations. Many officials in the Trump administration, and I see it many times with the people I speak with, see Israel as a reliable partner and a country that can be taken seriously in Middle Eastern affairs.
mm,
But at the same time, Europe's hesitation, and we talked about it, especially when it comes to Iran, raises serious and even more recently about their help to Ukraine in the war against Russia, raises very serious questions about its credibility. And I have to say this because many Israelis are saying it on social media. The younger generation in Israel
mm,
doesn't take Europe seriously anymore. And many of us
mm,
are tired of what we see as constant interference in our internal affairs, and they give us advice on how to fight against terrorism by the Palestinians. From our point of view, Europe is much of a talk, but it doesn't act when the values are challenged. Whether it is the rising of anti-Semitism, the act of vandalism against the Jewish communities, or serious terror attacks that shocked the public in Israel. Just a few weeks ago, it happened. So in this sense, Europe talks a lot, but doesn't act, but doesn't act, and it only deepens the. I wouldn't say it deepens the gap between Israel and much of Europe
the understanding.
because because our because and as I said earlier, our trust in Europe, especially of the younger ones, declined drastically, and especially after October 7th.
Mm, yes, yes. I see. I see. Mm. Yeah, it's frustrating, isn't it? hopefully, they get that thing right. Because as I bet, even hearing from far away as a Canadian Korean is difficult to hear. But as a young Israeli that knows everything, it's really annoying for the European nation to just always say nay and negative things about whatever the Israelis have as a solution. They have to, accept. They can't just
It is
always.
much more.
Mm,
It is much more than negative. I will say to you in a
this,
simpler way.
this,
Imagine that.
mm,
Imagine. I guess that most of our audience is South Korean, so I will try to simplify it.
mm,
Imagine that North Korea invades South Korea. It's not far off. It kills around. I wouldn't say that around 10,000 people
mm,
around the surrounding villages around the border. And what will happen? You declare war.
mm.
On the first day, Europe is saying, we stand with you. Together we'll defeat North Korea. Together we do. Together we do. On the second day, they tell the Korean leadership. It doesn't matter if it is
The left.
right wing or left wing. They say to the Korean leadership, be open for negotiations on North Korea's favor. It already happened. Europe did it.
Mm,
And on the third day, they say to you, we recognize North Korea as a reliable partner for the negotiations. And later on, you find out that the countries that said yes, North Korea is a reliable partner, they had some secret dealings with North Korea and turned a blind eye on their drug trafficking and illegal
mm,
weapons operation. That's
yes. Mm,
that's a very, let's say, simple way
mm,
explaining how Israelis view Europe, and it already happened.
mm. And I guess with North Korea, you're going to tell us more about it next time, right? With North Korea now. We talked about it in the first or second video about how they used to support Iran with weapons. I remember that part. And but yeah, it's kind of out of topic when I want to ask for the Korean viewers. Um, so just out of sudden I know, but in Korean media, as I told you earlier, it's very bad that like they're only portraying United States, Trump administration and Iran, Israel just as these demon being evil beings who are not stopping the war, and that's just how they're saying it all over Korean media. Korean media is not as fair as it used to be 20 years ago, of course. So, what is your take on that?
I would say I don't talk about any media. That's their issue. They're influenced by money,
Ah, okay.
But I think that Israel should not should take, let's say, a more Asian approach.
Mm,
Israel should focus on what I would call the near Asia, which is near Asia,
So,
which means,
mm.
yeah.
So you're saying Israel should take a more pan-Asian approach. Yes, continue. I got that. Yeah, I just wanted to clear on that. Yes, go ahead.
No, not exactly. No, not exactly.
No.
Because Pan-Asian is that belief that all Asian nations are belonging into the same, let's say, ancestral group. But I don't think this way.
Mm,
I mean, what I wanted to do, what Israel, in my opinion, and I say it many times in the social media on my account,
mm,
that Israel should making ties with smaller groups in the region. Let's say with the Druze on the Syrian mountains,
mm,
the Alawites on the the Syrian coast, the Kurds, we talked about them last time, the Baluchis in Iran, and more and more and more, and also
mm,
maintaining and strengthening the partnerships with the with Asian countries that have similar interests with us: South Korea, Azerbaijan, Japan, Taiwan, India, Vietnam, maybe countries in Central Asia, and maybe, just maybe, some Arabs who oppose the radical Islam. It can work. Uh, it also Israel needs to also focus. I talked about it with you in the previous video
mm,
to counter the Chinese and North Korean influence within the Middle East. Because not only that, because by doing so, not only Europe's leverage over Israel would decrease,
mm,
but Israel would also build stronger connections with countries that better understand its security reliabilities and can take it much more seriously. I talked about it earlier that many in Israel, especially the younger ones, view Europe as one-sided, and because on the one hand they talk strongly about values, international law, and all that, but it often directs its pressure towards Israel. I remember that during the war with the Hamas, during the war with Hamas, the Europeans pressured us to accept a ceasefire on Hamas's advantage, calling Israel not to send troops against terrorists in Lebanon. We will talk about that in a future video, maybe. While being far more hesitant when it comes to actors that threatened Europe, like Iran. It can be summarized in one word, which is called hypocrisy. That's how we view it. Because we also see that much of Europe, and we talked about it, is engaging much more with the Palestinian side and blaming Israel than addressing the broader threats in the region. There was a recent talk with the British foreign minister who said that Israel should stop the attacks on Lebanon. But when we see it, thousands of rockets were shot at Israel, especially from the north, throughout this month. So, and this perception is growing all the time. And even if Europe will face serious internal challenges, help from Israel and definitely not America, help will not come. Like, it's very much like the Israeli attitude that solidarity can't be one-sided.
Okay, I see. Thank you, Liam. It's really good input on that. And thank you for explaining all about today, as we talked about. Thank you so much we talked about relations in the Middle East and Europe's involvement in the Middle East and Iranian issue. And overall, lastly, do Europeans have different perspective on Israel? And what is Eastern Europe like with it involved? And how is the future going to pan out? And so Israel should take a more pan-Asian approach. That was a question. And thank you for answering. And before you go, Liam, thank you, everybody. Every week like this, we'll be talking about Middle East and global, political things, political information every week. So please subscribe and press like. Okay. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 오늘도 저희가 중동에 대해서 얘기해봤는데요. 저희 매주 이렇게 중동에 대한 것들, 그리고 국제적인 정치, 시사 같은 것들을 이렇게 가지고 올 것이니 꼭 구독하고 팔로우 부탁드려요. 감사합니다. And thank you, Liam.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
See you next time, okay?
Bye-bye.
Take care, buddy.
See you.
Cheers, buddy. Thanks for everything.
Cheers.
Cheers. Be safe.